I've played Final Fantasy VII every year for the last 29 years, but never like this.
Oh my god, there's so much that they cut out.
Today I'm joined by Shinra ARC members Turquoise Hammer and Odysseus to talk about their groundbreaking work and to ask them one huge question. Is it a remake, reimagining, sequel?
After Rebirth, I'm really sort of shifting towards
I'm Professor Noctis. I teach religion and Final Fantasy at University of Alabama, and we have a good time here on Scranton.
Hey everybody, welcome again to another Prof Chat. Today we are incredibly excited to be here with members of the Shinra Archaeology Department / creators and modders of Shinra Archaeology Cut for the FF7 mod community, and then also the creators of the Last Elixir YouTube channel. That's a whole mouthful, but you may know them as Odie and Turquoise. I want to welcome Odie and Turquoise to the show today. How are you doing today, guys?
Welcome, guys.
doing good.
Doing pretty good, thanks.
Terrific. We're delighted to have you with us today because even though I'm fairly new to the Shinra Archaeology Cut, I've been following the Shinra Archaeology Department for quite a while. And we want to get into all the ins and outs of that a little bit later. But for people that may be watching for the first time and have no idea what any of this jumble of words is that I just said, how would you describe your projects in your own words?
Sure. SAD, which is an acronym, SAD for Shinra Archaeology Department, is a fan-led, mostly translation group, but we also work on sort of unearthing old material regarding Final Fantasy VII, translating official guidebooks, interviews, stuff like that. We also sort of operate a Discord server, a public Discord server where people can come and ask questions about translations, about their own FF7 projects. And then we have a couple of other projects on the side. Odie, do you want to add anything onto that about SAD?
You pretty much got it covered. We're really like FF7 Renaissance men, I guess. We do a lot of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me get this straight. So the game came out in 1997, right, Wade?
Mm-hmm.
So this game comes out in 1997. The internet is a different place than it is today. It's a different audience.
Yeah.
We're playing it on CRT TVs on the PlayStation. And so there's all of this knowledge that was present around those times that has potentially faded with time. Now, one, it's insane that the game has been around long enough that it's able to have things lost to history. That's
Right.
crazy. Now, what's even more insane than that, and I think really cool, and I think we want to celebrate, is that you and a group of volunteers have decided to become digital archaeologists to go dig up old articles and interviews in a completely different language and then bring new light and context to the game that people love that they may never have seen before. Am I understanding that right? That's insane. Are you crazy?
Thank you. Let me give like a tiny bit more background on the genesis of SAD. So there's multiple fan sites for FF7. One of the biggest ones is called the livestream.net. And then long ago, it used to be called ACNet, AdventChildrenNet. And that was probably one of the most prolific English-speaking FF7 communities online. And they had a lot of translation projects. They translated a lot of parts of the Ultimania Omega, which is an official guidebook for FF7 that was released quite a long time after FF7.
2005, I think.
Yeah, 2005. And then a line of other Ultimanias or other official guidebooks. And the livestream.net, among other things, would translate these and put up the translations. And as I was growing up, as I was getting involved with the FF7 community online more and more, not just as an offline player, I read those voraciously. But anyway, so they have a forum over there on TLS, the livestream.net, and I would post from time to time, I think starting in 2015. And then, with the announcement of Remake, And then with the release of Remake, the community's gears really started turning again in terms of interest, in terms of enthusiasm for projects and unearthing material. You know, can we understand Remake better? Can we understand the direction this story's going to go in? And two people who were really interested in that were one named Kai Loomis and the other named Obsidian Fire. And those were the progenitors of SAD as we know it. And they eventually started the Discord, and they invited me, asking me, you know, we see you can speak and translate Japanese into English. You want to join us? And so I did. And then Odie came along sort of through a different process. We'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah, Odie, I want to know how you got into this, because every good project needs its progenitors, and I think we're getting to meet two of the people that are kind of carrying the torch. So, Odie, how did you get involved?
It's a little bit of a convoluted story, honestly. I had a hobby for a little while back starting like 2019 where I would kind of use this proprietary software to make custom-made books just for myself because I like collecting books.
Huh.
And I saw they were doing the Ultimania Omega, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. I should make a book out of that. I never actually made a physical copy of that in the end. But I knew how to use Photoshop and other like editing software, and I saw they were scanlating the pages. I think another guy, Round 2 Gaming, was the one originally doing it.
Yeah,
like,
this was SAD was scanlating them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I can help with that. I have this skill set that I could use to help you guys out. And so I think I DM'd Turquoise on Twitter and asked him if he wanted my help. And it just kind of spiraled from there.
Most good things do.
Odie was, I mean, like a total workhorse. He still is. You know, he would just buckle in and do this. And a lot of the scanlating, a scanlation, for those who don't know, is when you scan the pages of an original book. So in this case, we're taking these old Japanese guidebooks, scanlating the pages into high quality PDFs. And then Odie has to go in onto each page and sort of like, you know, erase the Japanese text, but keep the underlying graphics, which can be an extremely painstaking, grueling
tedious,
process. Yeah.
I've read these. Like, I've looked at your scanlations. I didn't realize that you were doing all of that. I literally thought that like they had already been translated, but you are going through and almost re-rendering, maintaining the original graphics and then putting the translation over.
Yeah.
That is incredibly tedious work. Thank you for that.
Imagine doing that across, I believe, roughly 2,000 pages
around
of various
2,000.
guidebooks.
Yeah.
This has got to be the modern version of a monk sitting in a room with a candle, hand
Illuminating
copying
the-
all
these
of the
things.
The
text.
FF7
Except
manuscripts.
erasing it so that you can actually, like, there's an extra step. Like, you're like making the paper that then they can write on too. That's insane.
You know, it sounds like horrible, and I'm sure for most people it would be, but for me, you know, it was kind of like Zen-like almost. You just like put on a podcast or some music and you just sit there for hours slowly cleaning text off of pages and then doing the typesetting for the English text.
It's just like mowing the lawn.
I've spent some time on this website, Shinra Archaeology Department, and I have used so many of your things just from my own knowledge and even reading a few things in some of my classes for students to understand the nuances of translation and then the difficulties and how different interpretations stem usually from different translation choices. So I've been able to use that a little bit. And it is an archive. It is a library of collections and, like I said, tomes and treasures that really, I've been an enjoyer of this game since 1997. It's so much deeper and has so much more material than I ever gave it credit for. And so, like, to dedicate so much of your time and so much painstaking, detail-oriented time and work for this, you know, it really, what is it about Final Fantasy VII that makes you want to give so much of your life to this? Could you take us back to maybe your first encounter with Final Fantasy VII? Like, what is it about this game that has captured you in this way?
I think I am a little younger than you guys. I was actually born the year FF7 came out, so I did not play it when I was like super young at all. I didn't have like a PlayStation at all for quite a while. But I think it was in 2012 when I was in like my junior year of high school. I don't even really remember why. I just suddenly wanted to play it. My sister was a big Kingdom Hearts fan when we were kids, so I was already somewhat familiar with the characters, but
The marketing team is really happy right now.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, so I just bought a copy on eBay and played it, and it really just got its hooks in my brain from that point on, because I just really fell in love with the world and the story and the characters, and I just needed to know more. And that's how I ended up on the Lifestream.net forums, reading all those same translations and articles that Turk was talking about.
I think that's so many of us, but what is interesting is that I guess if you were born in 1997, I mean, we're talking kind of mid 2000s, almost 2008, 10 even, when you get to playing it a little bit. And that is a little bit different from some of us that kind of grew up with it. You had other options. And I think that there's something to that today, because so many people are like, well, we needed a remake because this is the old game is irrelevant to today's audience. But you are kind of like, no, it still caught me even 13, 14 years later. Is that accurate for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't play it until, I think, 2013.
Okay.
And I was already kind of into retro gaming before that. Like, I was a big Sonic fan as a kid, so I had a Genesis and a Dreamcast just to play the old Sonic games.
And then 2 years later, they announced the remake.
Yeah.
That's what
That's the way
everyone
to do it.
was wish that
It's like,
they had
Remake
experienced it.
gets announced, then a couple months later, Cloud is getting in Smash Brothers, and I was like, wow, I got in at the right time.
You really
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, you picked up like the fantasy series when like 8 books were out already, and they just announced the 9th one. Like you just had
Right.
infinite material to keep going. The rest of us just had to wait and wait and wait.
Sure.
So I think, my memory is a little muddy since I was so young, but I think that I got it in December of 1998. So about, a little over a year after it came out in the US. And I went with my mom to like a Best Buy or whatever, a Kmart, I guess, back then.
Oh yeah.
And to get a PS1 game for my brother. And I had played the FF8 demo on that Pizza Hut demo disc, and I wanted to go in and get that one. That was the only FF game I knew about. And I guess either it wasn't out, was it not out? It came out in 99, right? I think FF8. So it wasn't out, so I got FF7, not really knowing what to expect. So it was really sort of only an accident that FF7 was my first exposure to the series. So I guess I was 7 years old the first time I played through it, probably maybe handing off with my brother at parts. And I'm sure there was plenty of stuff I didn't understand. But I have some vivid memories of certain things, like I think the Red 13 Sato scene hit me hard as a kid. The Aerith scene, ironically, didn't do a ton for me. Maybe I was too young.
Me neither,
But the
honestly.
live stream sequence, that really hit me. I love that. And I think I probably played it like, another 5 times over the next 5 years.
Did you immediately go to the forums after you played?
No, I don't even think I had intranet until 2000.
I mean, I guess it was 99, so...
Yeah, 2002.
Dialing up.
I remember being in AOL chat rooms talking to people about how to revive Aerith.
Such a troll.
That was real.
I was creating those theories.
You're
Yeah.
such a troll.
I think Game FAQs was established in 1998,
Yeah.
a year after, or maybe 1999. But then on their site, I think it only goes back to 2005 right now. Anyway, so a lot of those original, posts, message board posts and conversations and exchanges are unfortunately lost totally. But yeah, like you said, there was a huge forum for talking about how to revive Aerith, all sorts of bogus theories. Well, and that was also in Japan a lot too.
Yeah.
There was a huge phenomenon in Japan, and people even got these theories published in magazines, and it was common knowledge among the game's developers too. There's a video where we talk about that a bit, called "The Key to Aerith's Revival," something
like that.
Well, as we look towards the project itself, I wonder what it is to each of you about these games and what they mean to you that make this worth it. Because this wealth of information exists for most video games, probably. They all had long development cycles. There's a lot of games that have long stories, history that could be translated. But you didn't choose to do that on any of those. You chose to specifically spend the time on Final Fantasy VII. So what is it about this game, the story, the play experience, to you personally, that really compels you to make this explored in a way with so much depth and so much intentionality compared to other franchises when you could have chosen anything else?
I'll start this one. I think there's two big reasons. I'll talk about the first, although the second reason is bigger. The first reason from a translation perspective is that Seven's official translation is probably one of the weakest in the series, if not the weakest. And especially for its time, it was not a good quality translation.
For the sake of our audience, can you explain, in your opinion, what the difference between a good translation and a bad one is?
Yeah, sure. So for FF6, you have this famous translation by Ted Woolsey. That's sort of a contentious subject because it's famously very liberal translation. I mean, it sort of makes up a lot of lines wholesale, can tweak the characterization of certain characters, how scenes play out, the momentum of the scenes. But overall, people tend to receive it better. It was retranslated for GBA. Some people prefer that translation. I think that's the one in the Pixel remasters right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm going to set that aside. I'll go with the translation I think is a lot better, and that's FF9 was probably the first one that had a really solid translation. It had a team of translators that sort of, got the Japanese script, looked it over, said, okay, like, let's formulate sort of a philosophy to how we're going to approach this translation. A set of rules, a set of naming conventions. Are we going to say consistent with the rest of the series in terms of like terminology, spell names, stuff like that? And then what's going to be our overall approach to bringing out the charms of these characters? FF9 has this sort of medieval setting, so you have a bit of like the FF12, FF16-ish medieval, what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of older English phrasing. Vernacular, but at the same time it's very playful, and you don't want to go too deep into that. So I think they do a good job of that balancing act. And the English ends up sounding very natural, but also somewhat period specific in a charming way.
Okay, at this point I need to know a little bit of your background and how you know so much about this, and like why this particular thing. Briefly, I know, but I'm too curious. I can't hold back.
For these translations, I guess just curiosity. Looking up FF9 had a really great interview. Oh gosh, I can't remember who it was with now. Kotaku, Polygon, maybe someone else, with the localization team going into this. And also FF12, FF14, which is the same localizer, Michael Koji Fox. Is that his name, Michael Koji Fox?
Yeah.
He's super transparent about their localization process. So that's mostly just my own personal interest.
Did you teach yourself?
Yeah, did you study this in school? Why are we so... Yeah.
Or translation?
Both, either.
Both, yeah.
Japanese, I first started learning in college, so about 15 years ago now. And it was sort of on and off in terms of how serious I was with it. And definitely for the first half of that time, for the first half of the last 15 years, I wasn't as serious. I was kind of in and out. But I worked as an editor, and I still do, an editor and a copy editor. And I would work with clients some of my clients were Japanese authors translating Japanese texts into English, and they needed a lot of help, having natural idiomatic English translations, right? They would do the translation work, and these are old texts, stuff I can't translate, because it's, from 1500 years ago or something. But I needed to be able to sort of talk to them, and that was probably the stimulus to get back and get more serious about Japanese, speaking Japanese in general, and then just sort of stoking my interest in translation. So it started with these very academic texts, which compared to 7, 7 is kind of like peanuts compared to that in terms of just sort of like the vocabulary of 7. It's a game made for teenagers and kids. So it's not very hard to grasp just on the surface vocabulary level. But anyway, I just sort of continued learning Japanese. And then by the time I got interested in this project, that was 2021, 2022 maybe. You know, I definitely had the tools and the confidence to do it. And then just being in, you know, doing my own translations sort of made me interested in philosophy of translation. And I'm going to circle back around to that question of what is a good translation, because that's the important thing to talk about here.
I just know that so much weight has been given to different translations. And even in looking at some of the scanlations that you've done, Odie, and different choices that you make, I can't imagine the feedback you've gotten from people that is like, that's inaccurate or that's accurate or all that kind of stuff. And I wonder if you could maybe share with us, you know, number one, yes, I think that the whole conversation is about what's a good and what's a bad translation, but also what are the scenes that have been most contentious that you have noticed? And maybe we could talk about it through that.
Yeah. So let me just start with an example of, like, just for people who've never really thought about translation, maybe because they don't speak a second language, or because, even if they do speak a second language, they've never really tried to render one language into another naturally, right? So you have this phrase, literal translation. You hear it all the time, right? Like, I want a literal translation, right? But that phrase can be kind of oxymoronic, right? Because let's say you're literally translating an idiom, right?
Let's define an idiom for the
an
viewers.
An idiom is sort of like a turn of phrase that whose meaning is greater than the sum of its parts. So,
raining cats and dogs.
Right, exactly. Raining cats and dogs. It's raining very hard. So if you translated raining cats and dogs into Japanese literally, it wouldn't make sense. I mean, the person would think you're saying it's literally raining cats and dogs are falling from the sky. Right, so you would have to use a totally different phrase that conveys that sense of it's raining a ton, it's raining very heavily. So if you have a literal translation of a sentence, it's literal in the sense that from word to word, you're capturing the meaning of each word, right? But then if you read that as a sentence, as the sum of its parts, it's going to sound stiff, right? So if you're translating a sentence that is natural and idiomatic in the source language, but you end up with a sentence that word for word has the same meaning but is stiff and sort of like off-putting, then have you actually translated that sentence, right? Because translating is more than just capturing the individual meaning of each word. It's capturing the nuance of what's being spoken, the tone of the speaker, you know, is there some underlying suggestion, the emotion that it's trying to evoke, stuff like that, right? So you often find yourself having to sort of bend the literal word-for-word translation to capture the more important nuance, right? So if you compare the original 1997 FF7 translation to the remake one, in terms, like on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of how liberal is this with changing the exact word-for-word meaning of this sentence, I would say the original translation is like a 1 or a 2, right? Asterisk, okay, it makes a lot of mistakes, right? But when it does it right, it's like a 1 or a 2, right? It's very direct. I'm going to use the word, it's a direct translation. And it's very stilted because of that in parts. Whereas the remake is, you know, closer to like a 7 or an 8, right? It can really take these circuitous routes to arriving at the same meaning, but using a totally different, you know, it'll change the order of lines. It'll change a bit of the nuance, like internally, in order to arrive at the same sort of overarching nuance of an interaction between characters. So, and then I would say SAC, our translation is probably like a 3 pushing a 4 sometimes. So it's nothing like remake. We would be absolutely torn apart if it was as close to remake in terms of how liberally it treats the source material. But we do take enough liberties so that the English sounds natural, idiomatic. You don't have this feeling of friction like, oh, I'm reading a translation, right?
Yeah.
This was originally in a different language. You don't want to have that feeling.
That has been my impression of just the early parts. And I'm slowly going through the SAC to kind of sync up with my playthrough of Remake. So it's almost a side-by-side over the course of this spring. And I found it to be much more rolling off the tongue rather than the original, which is true, very stilted in some ways. And it leaves some things to be imagined or just straight up ambiguous, in my opinion. That said, it must be an incredibly heavy burden to try to think about your own interpretation and nuance in judgment calls on things. How do you balance that? And do you feel that nervousness? Are there some things where it's just like, I'm not touching that. It is as it is. I'm going to go.
Yeah. So you asked like scenes in particular, right?
Yeah.
Where we feel maybe that pressure. Definitely there are scenes like any kind of romantic scene, right? There's going to be that pressure. Sometimes we are miraculously saved by the fact that, so like the Remake trilogy will sometimes, the Japanese will sometimes use lines word for word from the original game and repeat that exactly verbatim in the Remake series.
Not nearly as often as you might expect, I should say.
Yeah, it's probably, it's less than 1% of the script in the OG.
Whoa.
So
what is that?
way less
What's a
than you would
reference
expect.
point for that? Like, is that a common number? 1%? Is that on the low end, the high end? Give me a reference.
Well, I'm not really sure what to compare it to, but like, I think people sort of assume that Remake traces a lot of the dialogue from the original, and then there's expansions. But no, even the parts that hew very closely to the OG have been totally rewritten in the Japanese. But there are those rare cases where it borrows lines perfectly. So one example is like the scene with Aerith and Cloud in the park on top of that cat slide structure, right? And there's a very sensitive line in there from Aerith in reference to her old muse, Zack. And fortunately, we didn't have to translate that ourselves. We could just offload that. We're like, okay, we have consistency with the Remake, right? The Japanese matches the Japanese. The English is going to match the English, right? So you get that sense of continuity.
Lucky there, because I think that's like the only line in that whole scene that's exactly the same between Remake and the original.
And that's the only one that would really get us in trouble.
Yeah. Well, let me interject real quick too before we talk more about these scenes too, because Odie, I want to hear a little bit from you about what it is, and maybe referencing some of these scenes. And you seem to be really interested in the challenge of getting it right. What is it about the game that you really love that inspired this? And are there scenes that really stick out to you from working with the team that you like? I don't know how we're going to pull this one off, but we're going to try.
Yeah, I got kind of sidetracked. I said the first reason is not as important as the second reason.
My involvement with the Shinra archaeology department kind of just crept up on me, I guess, because I wasn't really in it initially to scanlate every FF7 book ever made. It was just, there just kept being more and more stuff. And, it's like, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. Like, there's one, maybe my favorite one we did, maybe not for content, but just like the work I did on it was FF7 Dismantled, and that had never been meaningfully translated into English at all, and that's the very first Japanese guidebook, I should say. I think the literal title is like Final Fantasy VII, The Complete Dismantled True Story, something like that.
Sounds like a good title.
It's like, there's just so much FF7, so I kept having more and more things to do. For the mod itself, the reason I got involved was, it started for me way before Shinra Archaeology was even a thing. On the livestream.net, there was an article series written by our friend Shademp, who you might be familiar with. He's a longtime hacker and data miner of FF7, and he's nowadays he mostly does stuff for Dirge Cerberus. He's like helped develop the speed run for that and data mined it more than anybody ever has. But he had written this massive article series about all of Final Fantasy VII's like cut content. And, I'm just skimming over this. I'd always kind of had a fascination with unused video game content because like the game Sonic 2 has such a messy development history, and there's like all tons of remnants of that left over in that game. So I'm looking at this for my new favorite game, FF7.
Oh, there you go.
And it's like, oh my god, there's so much that they cut out. And a lot of it's really interesting to me and really elaborate. You'll see more of it as you play, so I don't want to spoil too much. I want to put this all back into the game. And this was around 2014, I think, when I started this. And I had just, like, for years and years, I was just on and off working on this, thanks to the modding community and all the incredible tools they made. I was slowly making this, like, content restoration mod. Okay. And then, like, early 2023, boys had wanted to start retranslating the original script, not even for a video game mod, just, I think we're just going to do, like, a spreadsheet with all the text.
Everybody loves a good, I don't know, 10,000 line spreadsheet.
Yeah, the
way more than 10,000.
Way more than
yeah, way more than that. I mean, the spreadsheet is public. It's annotated. It's a big part of the translation process. You can compare the translation to the Japanese. The original translation's also there side by side. So, like, if you're ever going through the mod and you see something, you're like, is that right? Or like, what was that originally? This sounds different. You can just look it up right in the spreadsheet. And it's got implementation notes, like, why did we make the choice to implement things like that? So a big part of this process was transparency for our decisions, and then just also like an archive for if anyone ever wants to take this mod, take it in a different direction, tweak things to their liking, or just, totally scrap our retranslation and use the template to make their own. That resource is there for them.
I love the open source approach. I think it's really charitable and really community driven, and I think really in line with kind of the research branding focus of the initiative that you're doing. So I do want to commend you on that as well. The idea that you could cultivate knowledge with the express purpose of organizing it and giving it away so that someone else, if they want to, can make it their own and create that passion that you both feel internally for this is really admirable. It's a lot of extra work to do that and then distribute it. And so just let me say thanks both for the approach and for the work that you've done. Let me reframe where we're at here so that everybody's kind of on the same page. So when you say the mod, what you've done is that you have, as best as you can, taken the original translation and missing content from the game. Now, when we talk about a mod, for those of you who aren't aware, when you play a video game, it reads the files of the game and it lets you play through the game. The audio, the dialogue, the gameplay itself. However, in the files are old bits and pieces that aren't actually used in the game. Maybe they're referenced for another reason, but there's like extra parts of the script that will be hidden in these files. So if you have a game installed on your PlayStation or on your computer, somewhere in the files that you go into, there are these extra bits and pieces of archaeology of the game's development that will bring you along. Now, you don't usually ever see or interact with those, but people called data miners will typically go in and they'll read those files. Sometimes they're encrypted, sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're packed away, and they'll research and find all these things. So you have done that and then created a mod for Final Fantasy VII that pulls from different scripts and resources that you have translated to then update the game so that rather than looking through a spreadsheet, you're able to just play the game and it's going to pull the relevant portions in for a seamless or as seamless as possible gameplay experience, right?
Right.
That's insane and so cool. Now, when we talk about translations, you talked about how the original translation was like a 1 or a 2. It was very literal in its interpretation. Word A is as close to word A as we can get. Now, you said some of the remake is more like an 8 or a 9, where it takes the phrases and the sentiment behind what the characters are thinking, the context in which they exist, to get to the more heart of the idea, the pulse of the story. And so your mod and your translation, you rated at a 3 or a 4. So it's a bridge towards that. Now, you use the word a more liberal interpretation. I think for clarification for folks, that's not a politically liberal or conservative interpretation. That's how much liberty, how much agency does the translator take in getting to the sentiment rather than the literal translation on that 1 to 10 spectrum. Now, knowing that all that is the case, if I'm correct on that, Wade, what is most compelling, you think, for the way that you've experienced it, and what do you want to know more about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the key. Playing through this mod, y'all were in the chat. the first time I'm playing it, my jaw dropped because of one decision that I made. Now, it was to give Tifa the flower. And then there were a series of sequences. Careful. There were a series of sequences that played out immediately following, sequences that included like an interruption from a Sephiroth memory, like a flashback sort of thing. And I was floored because none of that was in the original 1997 PS1 game. How do I even want to ask this? Can you explain that? Because here's what happened. After I played that, I started getting DMs that I can only imagine you have gotten in the past. DMs and messages on Discord saying, "Are you playing a fan fiction? Like, has somebody modded this to curate their own sort of hybrid sort of thing?" And at first, I didn't really know how to answer them.
I can.
That's what I'm curious about, Odie.
If you want.
Yeah, this is a totally Odie question, but I just want to say it was so fun to watch you play that and see your reactions. I mean, you were totally blindsided. I can tell.
That's why we love showing up for
it was very fun. Yeah, go ahead, Odie.
Okay, so that scene, if you're not familiar with the game's content, that definitely seems like something somebody added just to, I don't know, as a fan fiction or whatever you said. But that was all completely real and left over in the game. And I guess interestingly, all of that was cut extremely late in development. There are pre-release images in what is it? The
official establishment file, which was November 1996.
Yeah, that's a little preview book they released to hype up the game ahead of time. And it contains images from that sequence.
So it was in the it was in the game even a year prior to release.
No, it was in the game probably about a month or about a month. It was in the game up until testing, pretty much, I would say.
The game came out in January 31st, 97.
Yeah, the game went gold on New Year's.
I imagine that was still in the game as late as late November, probably.
Yeah.
Because it's also in magazine previews for the game too. Like that scene of Tifa and Cloud talking outside the bar instead of inside. That's all over early preview magazines for the game.
So let me just talk about an evidence-based approach compared to a fan fiction and the differentiation here and what this is not. So we've established that there's interpretation for the translation, yes, but this is not extra canonical content necessarily that was never included. This is stuff that got, for some reason, left on the cutting room floor, whether for story decisions, for editing, sometimes just for file size or different things like that. There's reasons why things will get done. But the evidence-based approach that you're taking here, I think, is the main difference between just fan fiction or fan interpretation and then the term archaeology that you're doing. Because you're substantiating the validity of its inclusion based on evidence that existed in promotional material, even with having this timeline to be able to do it. So this is a different thing. This is a different lens to be able to interpret authorial intent when it comes to the story than just someone's opinion of source material and references, or they wrote it like this famous book character and they really like to go to the pond and that's why this happens underwater, right? Like this is different. This is more cultural anthropology and archaeology as it relates to this. And so Wade, I think that's partly, to me, what has you so excited and so curious about all of it, because they've taken the time to gain some of this validity by doing the extra research for the context as well.
Yeah. Odie, I would propose that you talk about sort of those three levels of different.
Right, yeah, I wanted to get into that. Because I should say, even removed from having evidence of this via pre-release content, all of that is just still in the game, almost completely functional. The developers really kind of just the final version, Cloud and Tifa talk to each other about their childhood memory, right there in the bar. All the developers really did was crowbar that version of the scene on top of this older version and just removed all the flags and calls that would
Right, they
lead you
just,
into
like-
that old version.
Like they orphan the original scene, but it's still there, pretty much totally intact.
Like if you were to, call on different scripts, which otherwise go unreferenced in the final game, and a script is like just a collection of not code, but like commands that the game uses in its own like language. And say, let me introduce a little concept to you. It's called PPV. That is plot progression value. The game uses that to keep track of its like how far you are through the story, and say if you were to set your PPV to a certain value, I don't remember exactly what, but and be outside the 7th heaven bar, that entire sequence will just trigger. They didn't cut it out, I guess is what I'm saying. It all still exists. You just have to meet the conditions for activating it.
Okay, so they eliminated the conditions for doing that in the original release, and what you all have done is reactivate them?
Basically.
Okay.
You're Indiana Jones. Just put it like you're just tricking the trap mechanism to like not let the boulder roll down, like swapping the idol for the bag of sand to try and get it the right weight.
And I guess to give a little idea of some of the creativity that goes into this, I try not to take too many liberties, but in this case, I didn't want to completely remove the final, like, iconic version of the scene with Cloud and Tifa in the bar. So that's why in your chat, I pushed you into giving Tifa the flower, because I actually made which version of the scenario you get dependent on that choice.
Okay.
I don't think you did push him into it.
No, I was like... please give this flower to Tifa.
One of you told me to make
interesting.
sure you go try to leave Sector 7 and go to Johnny's house. Those two things I remember, and I was like, that was so much. Yeah, for sure. I'll be honest with you. You may have said it in the chat. I would have given the flower to Tifa anyway.
Okay.
Be careful.
I know.
Burden to bear.
It's my burden to
To
bear.
expand on what Odie's saying, part of the idea, part of the philosophy with SAC is that we don't want to sacrifice any content from the final version that's already in the final version to make way for stuff that was scrapped. So in the case where there's conflicting stuff and it sort of seems doable, we'll find a way to have both of them. And that's an example of that, where the flower choice,
Good trade-off.
if you have the flower,
And
will allow you to see one or the other.
I try to make it make sense within the game's own narrative as well, because I guess the point where the universes divide with that scene is Cloud's about to leave and Tifa's asking him to stay, and in the older version of the sequence, Barrett then yells from the basement for Tifa to not bother with Cloud. And that's and as we're in the final version of the scene, he doesn't interrupt. So, I'm trying to be a little creative with how I can keep both versions. So I'm like, okay, if you gave that flower to Marlene, Barrett is now probably a little more endeared toward Cloud than he was.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So maybe in that scenario, he's not going to interrupt them, and then things will proceed as they do in the regular version of the game.
So there are so many moments like this where it's like, oh my gosh, in the original kind of data of the game, this stuff existed. Were there moments as you are uncovering these things that you were like, oh, wow, I can't believe this is in here? And especially after the 2020 release of Remake, looking back at some of these things, and does that help you frame the Remake trilogy differently, understand some choices that they're making, or is it just completely a different kind of avenue?
Yeah, big time. Do you mind us spoiling like a few cut things that are...
You can totally do that.
Happen real soon.
That's fine.
One of them was when you go up to... Odie would be better at explaining the details of this. I'll just explain in broad strokes. First, when you right after you meet Aerith and you are going up to Wall Market, right? You go through the collapsed expressway. And in the original, it's a pretty straightforward map. You just walk up this cliff and you go down, and then you walk up this beam that is like very weirdly positioned in the environment. It can be kind of hard to tell like what layer, what level it's on.
I remember exactly that beam.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
it was a nightmare in the original.
I almost don't want to tell you about this because you would react so well, but
do you want me
just
to unhook and you can tell Evan?
Tell me.
Okay,
Let me
you
unhook. Tell Evan
Yeah.
and then just give me a thumbs up when we're good. I can edit all this.
Buckle up, everybody. The adults are out of it.
Well, I should probably explain
you explain.
finer details of this. This was actually our very first YouTube video on the Last Elixir channel too.
Okay.
But okay, so in the final game, there's just this beam in the environment that's not very clear if you can go across it from the upper layer or the lower layer, and a ton of people get stuck there. But in the files, I had found, like, this was a completely original discovery of mine. I didn't know this beforehand. But there's like a model for a wire placed on the map that's just invisible and you can't see it. And like the beam has different settings for like where, like its elevation.
Yeah.
And there's like,
Like
the
it's
game
XYZ.
has, yeah. And the game has pre-rendered backgrounds.
Mhm.
And those are like image layers, sort of like in Photoshop. And I found one a little above that crane that I couldn't understand what it was for at first because it's just like a copy of the road behind the crane.
Uh-huh.
But I realized, when I turned on the wire, it's like, this wire, this elevated position of the bar, and this pre-rendered background layer with the road all serves to like create this illusion of the wire holding up the beam. And the crane itself has an unused background layer state of being like lit up. And all of this combined made me realize, there was a puzzle here where you would interact with the crane and it would lower the beam down so you could progress. And they just cut it out.
They cut out the whole thing? Oh my gosh. So do me a favor. Let's all, on the count of 3, laugh really, really hard so he feels like he's really missing out. 1, 2, 3. Look how jealous he is. Okay, so it was a puzzle. So it was a puzzle that they cut out of the game. One of the most frustrating parts.
And
navigating that, and they just decided not to put it in anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the puzzle definitely gives more sort of visual guidance for how to get up this beam. Like it drops it, and you can sort of say, it dropped it onto this level here, so I got to stand here to get on it. But also the thing is, this crane is right next to this robotic hand, right?
Okay.
And as it happens in Remake, as you're going through the Collapse Expressway, you have this series of puzzles with Aerith where you have to control a crane to move these platforms around.
Man. So it was obviously in their mind.
Right, yes. So that was sort of like making good on that idea that they,
one of the most
for one reason or another, had to
places where the
let me give
him
the thumbs up, and I'll tee it back up for where we start.
I heard none of that, so.
Okay. So what you need to know is there are things about that scene in the game and aspects of Remake that they pulled from that were removed from the original game that would have made things make a little more sense. So you get to live maybe what the intent was that they wanted to do in Remake, and you'll kind of know what it is when you get there.
I just played that part in Remake last night, like on my own personal playthrough, not on stream. So excited.
Yeah. So I guess that's part of what I think is a good place to frame it, is the way that Remake informs and reaches back into some of the hidden assets of the original, and how it's not just a remake of a one-for-one. It's not a literal translation. It's not that level one. It's not raining cats and dogs. They also went back into the gameplay elements and said, what did we want to do there, but we couldn't do it for some reason or another. And so there's gameplay elements in the remakes that they wanted to get to potentially, but they didn't have the ability to, that you get to play through in Remake. So all of the new things aren't always random. A lot of them seem to be inspired by these assets and parts and these zigs and zags and trade-offs they made in the development cycle, Wade. So knowing that,
yesterday, for the 29th anniversary of the game, Tetsuya Nomura came out with a statement and some concept art that never really made it into the final game. But one of the things that he said was that in the Remake trilogy, they are able to capture the type of battle system that they were never really able to back in the 1997 release. And that can in some ways be extrapolated out to doing a lot of the things that they weren't able to do in the original release. There is such a discourse about what the remake project is? Is it the director's cut of what the game could have been in 1997? Is it a true remake? Is it a reimagining? Is it a sequel? After all of the work that you have done on this, how do you navigate that discussion?
It's a tough question because my expectations of the remake trilogy, as in like my expectations of where it's going to go with the story, and my expectations of what the creators are aiming for as a final product has sort of shifted a little bit. It was different at the end of Remake versus at the end of Rebirth, right? So at the end of Remake, you've got this really on the nose, well, you've got this really strong feeling that things are going to go in a different direction, right? Or that's at least what Sephiroth wants. There's this really strong feeling of meta-narrative of, you know, Sephiroth sort of knows what happened in the original games. He wants to divert the path, right? So that he succeeds one way or another, right? And I definitely thought that was going to play out more in Rebirth. Like, I never thought that Rebirth was going to be totally off the rails the way some people did. But at the same time, I thought there was going to be sort of a gradual divergence from the plot so that, you know, maybe at the end of it, we'd be like 75% off the rails, right? Whereas right now, I feel like we're maybe like 90% off the rails at most right now.
You mean on the rails?
90% on the rails, yeah.
Okay.
And I guess part of that for me is because in Remake, there were small changes to like the canon, which is to say the world building set up in the original FF7 in the compilation titles before Crisis, Advent Children, Dirge, Crisis Core. But the tweaks were small enough to be like, well, okay, this is just a reimagining, you know, they're sort of padding it out to be a little more believable, to slot more smoothly into the context of this modern day retelling of the story, right? And then in Rebirth, I sort of started to see that, okay, we're getting like a lot of really sort of significant changes to the lore setup, especially in Crisis Core, like the logic of the Sephiroth copies and the Sephiroth copy project, what happened in Nibelheim, what else?
How
Wutai, the whole situation.
works.
What? Degradation, yeah. In Wutai, the whole state of Wutai has been like pretty heavily rewritten. And I don't think that at all that these are changes that are from like timeline shenanigans or something in the game. You know, these are just sort of like the authors are just rewriting this stuff to fit with the story, to fit with the reimagined story they want to tell. So I feel like after Rebirth, I'm really sort of shifting towards, okay, they're really just, they want to retell the original story the way, you know, to some extent the way they originally wanted to tell it. In another way, just new ways they want to tell it now. You know, they've all matured as artists and creators in the last 25 years. And they want to add, you know, sort of deeper layers to the original story. And at the same time, you know, they say over and over again, we want this new layer of mysteries to keep old fans coming back, you know, so that in addition to just being able to replay the original, have that nostalgia kick, appreciate the game that they already love, they also get this extra layer of mystery that keeps their interest, keeps them engaged through the story. So I'm sort of starting to lean that way. And I think that whatever happens with these new mysteries I think we're probably going to sort of end up in the same point in terms of resolution. If there is any sort of meta-narrative extra resolution that happens with, you know, all the Whisper stuff, the Zack stuff, Aerith, you know, being in wherever she is at the end of at the end of Rebirth.
Yeah.
I think it's not going to change the story in a way that sort of makes it feel like a totally new entry and like a sequel. It's going to make it just feel like this you said it before. Rebirth is a sequel, or you quoting Sleep Easy. The Remake trilogy is a sequel to Crisis Core.
Yeah.
But it's not so much a prequel to Advent Children, right? Like it can sort of work. You can watch Advent Children after this, and I think it'll make sense chronologically. But the character arcs are probably not going to line up quite the right way, right? It's not going to have the same depth, the same thematic depth, right? It's going to feel like almost a de-escalation in scope going into Advent Children from part 3. That's my prediction. So I'm personally not as excited about that approach, but at the same time, I recognize objectively, it's probably what a lot more people want. It's probably the right call. And also, if it's what they want to do, you know, that's what they should be doing.
It's their game.
I'll still play it and love it either way.
Well, Wade, one thing I know that we want to talk about is kind of the impact on the community here. Do you want to jump into some of that now, or do you have some follow-up questions at this point?
The only follow-up question I have, and Odie, Turk, this can be for either one of you, probably the most contentious addition to the Remake trilogy has been the Whispers. And I have heard all kinds of thoughts and ideas about this. People saying, well, they wanted to put the Whispers in the original. Is there any data where there's Whispers in the original?
Can I be a little candid for a moment?
Please.
Yeah, you go ahead, get this one.
Okay, I recall our boy Max Dude once looking at the Rebirth version of the Sleeping Forest scene where Aerith is walking away and Cloud is getting held down. He's like, oh, this is what they always wanted to do. He was getting pushed back by Whispers in the original game too. You just couldn't see them, something like that. And I can't agree with that perspective on it.
Okay.
I do not think that was a sparkle in their eye in 1997.
Is there any text in italics that could be interpreted as a whisper?
They say the word whisper a couple times.
Confirmed. Whispers in the original.
Thank you, Control F. We appreciate that. Oh no, well, you had to at least do a little fishing expedition, Wade.
Well, I have to, because you hear all kinds of things, and one of the things that I've found in being, I don't know, it's weird to call ourselves content creators. I think of myself as more like a content curator. I try to bring in the best minds to discuss these kind of things. But regardless, you're going to catch strays all the time of people with all of their ideas. And what I have found when it comes to people's perspectives on the game is that oftentimes we see what we want to see. And we, in the absence of fact, we create a fiction that fits the narrative that we want. And what I've found to be so interesting about the mod and the work that you all do is that it is rooted in something that is a bit more fact-based. And that's why I asked the question, are there whispers in the data you've got there? It doesn't discount the idea that they could be reimagining all of this, but is it core? And maybe it's an avenue to tell these things that were covered up, who knows? But I think that to me is one of the most interesting pieces, because that's the heavy burden of interpretation and translation and really thoughtful critique of these games. Like, how much is me and how much is real? And to a meta narrative is maybe part of the game itself. What's fact and what's fiction, I guess, in some of the early marketing. Maybe that is where I'd really love for us to go, and then talk about just a few final questions. For the two of you, how do you negotiate what you want to happen or what you want to be the case between what actually is? Do you ever feel that tension? And have you ever made a post or something and said, I don't personally like this, but this is what it is?
I mean, yeah.
I have. And I have explicitly almost said that word for word at the end of a post. I think after Rebirth came out, maybe a month after it came out, I made sort of my best jab at what's going to go on. And we could probably go into this more as we talk about like predestination, Jungian, Jungian collective unconscious, Yogakara, stuff like that, if we have time. But yeah, I liked the whispers in the first game. I didn't really feel they were as necessary in the second game. It didn't feel as sort of as deliberate an application of them.
I think they had an interesting narrative function to serve in Remake, but in Rebirth they just kind of feel like they're there because we already had them.
Yeah, do you think there's maybe some necessary continuity that they have written in for the final game that they just... So you felt like Rebirth was more of a whisper bridge, if you will, to maybe get it to the end, and they had their strongest moment in Remake.
You could say that about a lot of things, right? You know, I don't like this, but maybe it's necessary because it's going to pan out in part 3, which can be kind of
that we're
frustrating.
in. That's the challenging tension, right? Is that we're formulating opinions on an incomplete work, so and that's where we drift from fact into theory, supposition, and interpretation, right? But I think you guys do a really good job of managing that tension based on the work and the conversation.
Most of our work, by its very nature, tends to be more oriented just towards what we know, rather than trying to predict the future, per se.
But you can be curious about it, and I think that is what is so fun about this project, and why it impacts the community in the way that it does, is because you're approaching it with a lot of charity, saying, this is probably what it is, this is what we know for sure, this is what we kind of know, and this is what we think. And as much as you can, you're going to take what you know for sure, and you're going to try and make that in. But then when we get into that, what moves your interpretation from a 1 to a 4 on that kind of liberal interpretation is that you're trying to bridge a little bit of that narrative and that experience. So I think that that's fun, but it also sets a really good framework for the community to discuss things. Rather than it just being opinions solely on interpretation, you're introducing some things that are factual, things that are unknown, things that are substantiated and researched. So let's talk a little bit about what this has been like to bring this to the community. What do you hope that it provides for the community, and what have you really enjoyed about interacting with folks around this project?
One of the big goals of the retranslation specifically is to sort of give players this experience of, when you have the compilation and the remake titles referencing, so in Japanese, calling back word for word lines from the original game, as if you're a Japanese player playing it, you're going to recognize that line exactly and be like, oh, this is calling back to this scene in the OG. And not only is it a fun sort of Easter egg thing, but it also sets the tone of what to expect. Like maybe there was something significant about that line in the OG that now resonates in this new context. And when you're playing in English, so the compilation and especially the remake localizers didn't have the same freedom to take those lines word for word because they were very stiff. They would really stand out in the newer, more modern localizations. They would be like strangely stiff, and they might just even have like the wrong terminology in them, right? Because like in the OG, the research and development division was called the science department. Aerith obviously was called Eris. So you have these little conflicts that make it just too hard to put those lines in word for word. Not to mention in Remake, you have to deal with lip sync timing, right? So yeah, even if you did have a perfectly well-translated line from the 1997 OG, it might just not fit with the lip sync. You
don't want it to feel like a dub.
Yeah. So one of the big goals is to make English-speaking players feel like, to have that sense of continuity and cohesion across titles, right? Like this really is a sequel to this game. It refers back to it. It doesn't feel as fanficky as maybe, especially something like Crisis Core, right? A lot of people felt like that just felt like a spin-off introducing all these new concepts and characters that have nothing to do with the OG. There is a lot more continuity. I feel like that this sort of like this linguistic continuity, using these keywords and these key phrases, like I cherish everything, like keyword, like, Cloud's line at the end of Advent Children, you'll see that echoed in the original, stuff like that. So to restore that sense of cohesion, continuity to English-speaking players is one thing. And then I think with the cut content, just, it's an adventure. Like if you love the FF7, you feel like you've spelunked it for everything it has, there's this whole new world of stuff you can play. And it's not just fanfic, it's like official stuff, right? So you play and it is stuff that you can read into to an extent and use to inform your theories, and that's really fun.
How has it been received by the community since you kind of released it and have been managing it more actively?
Like overwhelming support, for sure. The vast majority of messages we get, aside from just like, oh, this is great, thank you for making this, is stuff like, hey, this line doesn't sound quite right, may I suggest this? Like very cordial,
collaborative,
constructive criticism, a lot of which we take into account. We've made tons and tons of revisions. We're on like patch 1.408 right now.
We're on
right?
We're on 1.423 currently.
1.423. And a lot of that stuff is just due to community feedback. And we're just, zoning in every day on a sort of a more streamlined, natural feeling translation. And also just fixing bugs in the implementation of the cut scenes.
Yeah.
Not that this has much to do with anything really, but one of the things I've been doing a ton lately is the guys who made the modding platform 7th Heaven and FFNX, I've been helping them like diagnose and fix issues with the PC port that we're all playing.
The new one.
Not the one that's coming out.
That's coming, okay.
Been around since like 2012. Because I guess my ideal is to have like, the reason I put all the cut content in on like a personal level was just to have like the most cohesive, complete version of FF7 possible. And in the mod, you can choose between using the cut content or playing the straight original game.
Yeah, we should have specified that earlier.
Interesting. Okay.
There's a vanilla mode, which is just the retranslation, right? So if you want to say like, okay, I want to play the way the developers intended it, with the streamlined pacing, whatever reasons they cut content out, you could do that with just the retranslation. But definitely suggest doing the cut content mode if you've already played through the game at least once.
Yeah.
And you could do it for your first time too. I don't think it's going to drastically change your experience. You might have like a little confusion.
Say not to use it for the first time, but I think it's honestly probably not a big deal one way or the other.
I think worst case scenario, you'll run into a case where you're talking to someone, you're like, oh, and I like that scene where such and such happened. They're like, what are you talking about, right? I like the scene where they had the flashback outside of the bar.
Well, that's true. I mean, in that sequence, that same stream, as you are about to go, or I guess while you're downstairs in the basement of 7th Heaven,
right,
there's a Sephiroth appearance early.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? I mean, that is one of the biggest complaints that I hear about the remake trilogy is that Sephiroth appears too early. But he wouldn't have really appeared at all in remake if that's the case.
I do think that was all specifically cut. And we have a video about this actually, because they wanted to keep his mystique up for longer. So they removed all that early appearance of him.
When you put him in Kingdom Hearts and Smash, though, the mystique is kind of gone. I mean, everybody knows who he is.
Right. I mean, there was no way they were going to replicate that in Remake.
I'm just waiting for him to be in Fortnite or something.
Oh, please.
It's going to happen.
Listen, I do it.
Fortnite comes for everyone.
Fortnite comes for everyone. He was in Apex, or I guess different FF7 skins were in Apex, so.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Game everyone plays.
Truly.
I can't wait for my Sephiroth Happy Meal. It comes with one really, really long
It's called a despair meal.
One long fry.
One really long fry.
I come to bring you despair.
His sword, yeah.
I guess to kind of close up here, because we could talk about a lot of things forever. The two of you strike me. I come from an academic background. I do research a lot, and I help students learn how to do research. And the way that you are able to answer questions and pose your ideas is so refreshing because it's not rooted in it's not head canon or fanon, as we sometimes say, the fan canon. Instead, it's very data driven. when it comes to that kind of presentation, that is something that really shows hours and hours and hours of research and study that you have done. So from one researcher to another, just in different fields, well done. A plus, I guess,
Thank
in
you.
that. I'm curious how the two of you have grown as people as you have done these projects.
For me, I've had to talk to so many people while we've done this. I always kind of viewed myself as not very people person, but I've done so much collaboration with so many wonderful people, and I picked up all kinds of skills along the way too. The video editing I'd never done before our YouTube channel, really.
So do you do all the video editing for Last Elixir?
It's split a lot between the both of us nowadays.
Okay.
Early on, I was doing all of it, but time.
He does the high concept stuff, and and anything that requires a green screen in-engine recording with the models, he does that.
Evan,
Yeah.
I didn't send you Last Elixir YouTube as far as just pre-research. Their videos are exceptional. And if anybody has not seen the Last Elixir videos, some of the best, I don't even know if I would call them theory video. They really are archaeology videos, right? It's like, this is a new way of thinking about this, but it's rooted in fact, in interview, in data, and some of the best content out there. So truly incredible stuff. So Odie, you've
Thank
grown
you.
in working with people. What about you, Turk?
Definitely that to an extent. And I should mention that we've had so much help on this project. I mean, I do the vast bulk of the translation, 98% of the translation work. Odie does of the actual implementation work. He does everything. But there's all these other programs that have been built by other members of the community. Mako Reactor by Miss Dare, is that how you would
I
say
think
that?
that sounds pronounced.
There's a number in there. It makes it hard to pronounce. Amy, pet friend Amy is Scarlet.
I guess
All sorts of other modding tools. The Quim community, that's a FF7 modding community. Tsunamods, people behind Seventh Heaven.
Yeah, Sunamods. I know them. I did their voice
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Great
the
mod.
models that you're using, I think.
I think they
Those
did
Nino style is on their
Chibi's,
team.
Nino. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I guess I should
There's
say
also
to,
another team reunion there's sort of a fracture in the community that happened, but they all contributed early on to the community and to the tools that we all have
our
access to
spreadsheet
today.
is actually the same one they used, at least based on it.
So the person who mined the text from the 1998 PC port is this guy named Herman Maltz. And we thank him in the description of every one of our videos. And sometimes people ask him who he is, and nobody knows who this guy is.
Nobody. But
He just appeared one day, mined the whole script, and vanished. No one knows who he is. So I think it's funny to just always shout him out.
Well,
Evan, we got to find Herman.
somebody else can start Shinra Detective Department, and
That's it.
Yeah.
they can do the private investigation to figure out who this wonderful person
yeah.
In
is.
terms of my growth, so interacting with more people, definitely getting to talk to people in the community, especially after we released it. Got all sorts of people who did spell checking, bug testing, but also Japanese translation development, obviously, working with this massive script. It's from 1997, so you get all sorts of wonky 90s references, stuff I have to look up all the time. I'll be reading something, I'm like, all right, this doesn't quite sound right. Is this a reference to something? And sure enough, it's a quote from a movie from the 1980s, and I learn about that a little bit.
Do you have an example of that comes to mind? I just one.
Yeah, sure. So in Gongaga, excuse me, the city where Zach's from, right? In FF7, if you talk to the mayor 10 times in a row, he'll give you this strange new dialogue. And I was like, all right, this sounds kind of cheesy, from an anime almost. And it's from this 1990s mech anime movie called Big Robo, or maybe it was a TV
Giant
series.
Robo?
Yeah, Giant Robo. And I had to look it up and find the context for it.
So cool.
So that's one example.
No, that's
But
great.
there are many
That's
more.
awesome.
And there's also the debug rooms, which is something that maybe you'll get to in your playthrough.
Okay.
Each of the devs who worked on implementing parts of the game has their own debug room. You can go in, it's full of like little NPCs, and there's tons of jokes and cultural references in there. And then one of them had like a really heavy Kansai dialect. That's what Kate Sith speaks.
Okay.
Although when Kate Sith speaks, it's pretty toned down and easy for general audiences to read. But this was thick, so I had to actually talk to one of my Japanese friends who knew Kansai dialect. I've never talked to anyone with a really thick Kansai dialect, so I didn't know.
That is so cool.
So that was a learning experience.
No, that's fascinating. All right, Wade, bring us home.
Yeah. To end, this has been fascinating. I am new to modding in general. I think I downloaded the Seventh Heaven mod about a year ago to play through the Sunamod's voice mod. And stumbling across this, I immediately kind of had that knee-jerk reaction that a lot of people do of like, hey, whose interpretation is this? But to discover the absolute amount of work that you all have put into this to give us kind of the truest understanding of the game, from cut content, the inclusion of all kinds of things. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you also for being on this to help our listeners and viewers understand the wonderful world of modding, but also the wonderful world of Final Fantasy VII. It's been amazing. If people were interested in what you are doing and either wanted to check it out or maybe even be in dialogue with you, maybe even contribute, where could they go?
I'll talk about... Wait, what was the first question? If they just want to...
If they wanted to check out what you all do.
Right.
And then secondly, if they feel like they have a skill that might be
I'll do
beneficial.
the plugs first.
Yeah.
And then Odie can answer the second one. So we've got the Shinra Archaeology website, which is just shinraarchaeology.com. That's archaeology, archaeology.com.
We have the link down below in the comments.
It's a totally free website, no ads. And you can browse, thousands of pages of official FF7 translations, or translations of official FF7 material. On that mod page, there's also a link to if you're on the landing page of our website, there's a link to the Shinra Archaeology Cut mod. It'll give you a bunch of information about it. Although I suspect most people are going to be booting up Seventh Heaven. And if you go into the mod catalog, you'll see the Shinra Archaeology Cut. Super easy to install. There's a README. There's a little description on the left-hand side. You can check that out for a rundown, although the most thorough explanation is on the website. We've also got a Blue Sky account where we post news. A lot of it is about like Rebirth and soon to be Part 3 once that news starts coming in. But we also post translations of old FF7 material. Like, for example, I've just been going through this 10-part series of interviews that Nomura did with this Japanese magazine in 1999 and 2000. It's super fun. He gets super candid, talks about all sorts of funny things. So you can find stuff like that. That's the archaeology side of it is very much present there, in addition to reporting on the latest news. And finally, there's the Last Elixir Productions channel, which is sort of inspired by the SAC mod. And we go really super in-depth into cut content, development history of the game. Sometimes we've just got short videos on like really wacky things, like why is this NPC on this one floor of the Shinra building so messed up? Like, why did their model get messed up? So it's fun stuff. Definitely check that out if you're an FF7 fan and, want to watch a video while you're eating lunch or something. Odie, so in terms of getting in touch with us to help, or if you have questions.
Yeah, there's a couple good places. We do have our own Discord, which I believe there's a link for that on the website as well. If you want to get in touch with me about the mod, the place I check out the most is the Sunamod's Discord, which they have a channel for Shinra Archaeology Cut on there. I'm always answering people's questions and taking their feedback. And There's also the Kim Discord server, which is kind of the sister Discord to the Sunamods one. I'm in there too.
I called it Quim earlier. Yeah,
Quim. K-H-I-M-M.
Or Q-H-I-M-M.
Oh, yeah, Q. I do also have on there, the Quim website, I have a thread for Shinra Archaeology Cut, in case you're feeling like it's 2006.
Yeah,
for their
and you can
forum.
also DM us on the Blue Sky
On all
or
the
like
things.
anywhere, or our individual accounts. We check it all.
Great.
We'll get to it eventually.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time with us and for all this amazing work. It was
Thanks for having us.
so
and
much fun to learn about.
I'm so excited to watch your reactions, man. You think you're going to get back to it next week?
Tuesday, I will be back on it. Well, thank you again so much for being a part of this. Everybody, make sure that you are checking out the channel, Prof Noctis everywhere. Whether we have a Prof Chat or our lecture plays or upcoming video essays, make sure to like and subscribe. And with that, walk tall, my friends, and we will see you in class. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Bye-bye.